My entry into spirituality was so much about ascension and enlightenment and connecting to source and oneness. And there was so much magic in reaching that unified state, but there was also something inherently disorienting about trying to move out of this singular body and like the separation of our real world as like, this is the achievement.
Welcome to the Soulful Impact podcast, illuminating a path to building a better world while living a life of fulfillment and freedom. I'm your host, Brooks Barron, and my guest today is Marie Janicek.
The most powerful piece has been understanding these waves of emotion as waves of energy that have information to disseminate through our system.
Marie is a dear friend who has also been a client and a teammate of mine. She participated in my 2022 Vision Quest program here in Colorado, and then came on as my assistant for the year 2023 as I was in the early days of building what is now Soulful Impact. Marie is an intuitive movement, pleasure, and embodiment guide, weaving together her expertise as a physical trainer with her deep personal and spiritual journey to help others unlock their embodied intelligence and vitality.
Soul is sort of the reciprocal end to spirit's source. It is the magic of where humanity meets divinity. And it is in the separation and in this uniqueness that like the true magic of creation lives.
In this conversation, we explore Marie's journey specifically through the lens of soul work. She calls embodying soul being a mythical and magical being, and she describes how soul embodiment was really the missing piece for her in her spiritual path before she came on that 2022 quest.
I mean, as you were talking about modernity, what was also coming up for me was this pain I feel in the collective body in being severed from our connection to our bodies and our connection to ourselves.
Marie and I dig into the question of what embodied intelligence really means, how soul serves as a guide for us, and how to navigate the many ups and downs of the path. We dance around the core theme of remembering and reclaiming our innate sensitivity as human beings, how challenging and chaotic that journey can be, but also how that sensitivity is really our greatest gift that helps us come home to ourselves and create soulful impact. Before we begin the episode, a brief reminder that if this conversation resonates with you, I'd love to invite you to explore more of our work at Soulful Impact. We are committed to supporting you in finding and living your soulful impact in any way we can, including this freely available podcast, and also through one-on-one coaching, coaches training, our regular sound alchemy ceremonies in the majestic Colorado Rockies, and our annual Deep Dive Vision Quest program in the soul-stirring desert of Southern Arizona. Learn more and get in touch at soulfulimpact.co. That's soulfulimpact.co. Marie Janicek, welcome to the Soulful Impact podcast.
Thanks for having me here. It's such a joy to be sharing this space with you, Brooks.
You are so welcome. Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm just so excited that we're doing this.
Me too.
Yeah. You were one of the early people to give credit where it's due, who were like, hey, Brooks, just kind of poking me a little bit like, hey, podcast. You should start a podcast. So here we are. Full circle. We're doing it.
Full circle. Yeah. It's been such a joy to be able to witness you claiming your gift with how you move words and concepts through your speech, your embodiment, your poetry, your love.
And I'm excited to invite you to do the same here today.
Yeah. Feels edgy and exciting and thrilling. I'm really eager to be here.
Well, I remember the what's coming to mind is the time that you and I first met each other. We were in Hawaii, in Maui, for my brother's wedding. You were there as a date with one of my brother's close friends. And I think we were sitting at breakfast and I was telling you about my back pain. Is that right? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And then later that day, you were guiding me through some movement practice.
Yep. My movement magic.
Yeah. And then, what was it? maybe a year later or even less, we were you were coming with me on a vision quest. But would love to just hear you recap a little bit, like what was happening in your life at that moment, and what in particular called you to say yes to the Vision Quest program with me.
Well, I remember there were many pieces at play. I'd sort of been in what felt like a tangled dance in relationship to what I believe is my life's work, this practice of attuning to our embodied intelligence and learning to create more trust in that relationship and let that, or what I believe to be divine life force that's flowing through us, to guide us more and more of the time. And I had been on the heels of a pretty traumatic experience of trying to put that work in the world, and really at my own expense, the expense of my love and relationship to it. And I felt tremendously lost. At around the same time, I'd also been changing my relationship to what had been my sort of spiritual center at the time, which was the work I was cultivating as a result of Dr. Joe Dispenza's body of work. And I was at about 5 years in of really practicing that, but feeling some dissonance and not really knowing how to orient my spiritual self. And so there are these big chasms and these key pieces of me. And I just remember sensing from you that first time we connected in Maui that this is a person who is attuning to the subtleties of how life force moves through us. The way you were speaking about your experience moving to Carbondale and some of the evocation that was coming through those events just made me feel like, oh, maybe we speak the same languages.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got to know you more and as you welcomed me into what I believe was the first big iteration of your work,
Yeah, that's right. It was the first time, not the first time I had guided a Vision Quest, but it was the first time I had run one entirely of my own design that was also nested within a broader online program. So I think that version you joined was like 12 weeks or something. It was like so it was the first time I was really pulling together these different threads of work that had been so meaningful for me, the coaching work, the plant medicine work, and the Vision Quest work into one big stew, one big pot, and seeing what bubbled up. So yeah, thanks for being one of my guinea pigs.
Yeah. Well, I just remembered so much of what you were speaking to really resonated with me, especially what feels like the core of all of your teachings, which is soulful impact shows up very different than what we think success is supposed to look like, and trying to address the chasm between the two. I don't know if my testimonial video is still up on the site, but I will never forget how struck I was by experiencing a whole set of transformations that I didn't know I wanted or needed, but got as a result of that container. And a few key pieces were really this concept of soul. This concept of soul filled such a missing piece for me in my spirituality and like my embodied understanding of how spirituality flows through us in our physicality. In-depth exploration of what it means to be a soul, both through Bill Plotkin's work and conscious leadership, and your intuitive and beautiful weaving of those and your own personal experience, allowed me to build this bridge and sort of find this foundational missing piece within my own spiritual energy, human meets divinity infrastructure, and find a kind of coherence in my life that I'd been longing for a really long time.
Not sort of radiating, like fully radiating over here. Yeah, a little water in my eyes, just so moved to hear you share that, and I can so relate to it. And yeah, and would love to hear, to the extent that words can capture, which will obviously be limited in this terrain. But when you look back now, the missing piece that soul has filled for you, and has that empty space that soul has moved into and animated your life from since then? Like, how else would you characterize it?
I have so much to say about this. It's become like a personal point of mostly curiosity and just love, but that may be bordering on obsession. um, Mad scientist level, but I yeah, I think for me, my as entry into spirituality was so much about ascension and enlightenment and connecting to source and oneness. And there was so much magic in reaching that unified state, but there was also something inherently disorienting about trying to move out of this singular body and like the separation of our real world as like, this is the achievement. And learning about soul, and I'll speak to like my personal embodied understanding of it. Soul is sort of the reciprocal end to spirit source. It is the magic of where humanity meets divinity. And it is in the separation and in this uniqueness that like the true magic of creation lives. And as a soul, you are this unique being, this unique entity, this unique mythical creature.
Yes.
In the sense that this being that is you in this body right here, right now, has never lived before, will never live again. And if I am really here to enact and live my soul's purpose, how do I allow myself to cultivate the space and the devotion and the reverence to discover and uncover this mythical, unique creature that is me? Because unless I discover her, no one gets to experience her.
And she doesn't get to be experienced. Yeah.
No, and what could be more magical, more mythical, more mystical than discovering and uncovering this unique entity that you are, that you get to be and bloom into and unfurl and discover and expand and enrich more of throughout your entire life?
Oh man, you're on fire. Preach. Preach, sister. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Like I said, bordering on obsession. Like when I really think about what it means to be a soul, this unique subset of source, this unique kaleidoscope of gifts and genius and design, like there is nothing more spiritual or more transcendental, more magical, more mythic.
I just wanted to observe just thank you again for that spectacularly beautiful wordsmithing and poetry. And yeah, and to observe the way in which that balance between spirit and soul and upper world and underworld and light and dark and oneness and uniqueness, that they're so important with each other and for each other. And to that point of bordering around obsession, because that is can be like a uh one of the pitfalls, I think, of like as you enter into this magnificent terrain of soul. And ego is a crafty actor and is very capable of co-opting any idea, any experience that you've had, right? There's that one, I think someone maybe shared this with us together. It is like your ego has been to every personal or spiritual growth retreat that you have. Your ego has read every self-help book that you have. Like your ego knows all the tricks, or knows how to manipulate. So any idea, including like this magnificent mythical being that you are, can, if you're not careful, become a little obsessive in the sense that you think you're so hot because you're so special. But that's not soul. That's ego creeping in, right? And so I find like some supportive, like also the balance of actually coming back up to spirit and that oneness, and remembering like I am also at the very same time not even a me at all.
Yeah, in some ways, I personally have found this little like slide on the scale as when I appreciate more of this incredible gift of individuality, it invites me into being able to appreciate and witness the gift of others in their individuality. It opens me up to receive the unique transmissions that are happening all around me. And I hear you in the trap of the ego. And it's, yeah, it's been interesting to witness the many places it's cropped up in my life in relationship to the soul work as well.
Yeah, it's like a vast oversimplification, but I've found it helpful to sort of notice that to generalize, you could kind of categorize two ways that the ego co-ops the spiritual path. And it's, again, oversimplifying, but spiritual materialism being like, I'm so special because I'm so spiritual, and spiritual bypassing being like, I'm going to try to escape my human experience by doing spiritual practice or thinking spiritual thoughts. And to me, there's some truth in that, at least in my experience, that like spiritual materialism can be a little more associated with that downward direction of soul, and spiritual bypassing can be a little more associated with that upward direction of spirit. Um, but it's all just part of the mysterious terrain for us to kind of find and track ourselves and like play this game with our crafty little egos and seeing the ways they're gonna jump in and, put us to sleep, and we get to find our way to wake back up again. But yeah, share a little more about what that all kind of brings up in you, and what you were referring to earlier around.
Yeah, I think like for me, the biggest place I've witnessed my ego inserting itself is the spiritual bypassing trend. I have a lot of programming around this that I'm currently working through actually. This sense that if I'm not beaming love and light, then I'm not okay.
Mm,
there's there's a way in which the soul stuff also like amplifies this, which because my belief is how we feel is always a much more powerful emanation than what we do or what we say. And how we fundamentally feel when it lines up with what we do and then what we say is so much more impactful. And knowing that, there's like a way in which my ego dances me out of actually lining up with what is true and what's present and what's authentically moving through me in a moment. As practiced and as well versed as I am in flowing and moving emotions through or energy through my body and my system, there are still so many ways in which I like resist the discomfort of the negative emotions, especially fear and anger. Sadness, I welcome a lot more readily, but fear and anger have like this primordial, like kill tone to them in some ways,
mm,
or like
mm,
there's a signature of death that I'm uncomfortable with. And
mm,
yeah, it's very easy for my ego to dance me into the corner of only beam love and light and don't let this other stuff through.
mm,
And the interesting thing is every time I end up in that dance and find myself damning my own emotion, both like actually repressing it and in some ways judging it and not allowing it, it's yes, it negatively impacts people around me, but most of all, it negatively impacts me. Like the person
yeah.
who experiences the most of the sacrifice as a result of that is me.
Yeah. Damn how that works, you know?
Yeah,
Totally.
it feels like the real nudge is just like feel what you feel and welcome it.
It's really that simple, but that doesn't make it easy, or at least,
Oh,
yeah,
oh.
right? Like, it
Yeah.
can be easy, and
Mm,
we are pretty damn good at making it hard.
yeah.
And there's a lot of real reason why. Yeah, it's hard. Makes sense that it's hard for us.
Mm,
Um, it's this it's this experience of allowing ourselves to be obliterated, that's what it comes down to for me is like a really intense feeling that we are accustomed, that our ego is accustomed to shutting down or escaping from in some way. Actually allowing that energy to fully move through us feels to that ego part of us like an obliteration, like a full death. That's how intense it is, and that's how much it stretches us beyond our control, right? Like if we could call that part of us that wants to shut it down as the part of us that wants to be in control of our experience and stretches past what actually is ours to control, but in an attempt to find control and through control, find safety and security. It's quite the balance, isn't it? But finding that place of empowered surrender that I know this is going to obliterate me, and like there's this great quote from Pema Chodron and that I've heard Joe Hudson paraphrase as, offer yourself up again and again for obliteration and you'll find the part of you that can't be obliterated. And to me, that's the key. Like that part, that's what I call soul. Soul cannot be obliterated. It just can't. It transcends all materiality. And so therefore, as we offer ourselves up for obliteration in, of course, a conscious, intentional way, safe way, right? Like there's very real circumstances and reasons and times in our lives where we have to be really in attunement with what feels safe and what we feel capable of, because it is possible to overdo it and then you freak your system out and you end up in a bad place. But when you can hold it from that empowered, loving place and or be held with support, you find, oh yeah, I can let myself be obliterated and I'm totally okay. Wow, how liberating is that?
Yeah, and the more I just allow myself to be in the fluid dance of death and rebirth, obliteration and resurrection, I it's like so intellectually obvious to me that when the obliteration happens, what's actually happening is like all the infrastructure is disassembling to make space for something new and more. But the experience of that requires running intense energy. It's literally like creation energy, and it's white hot, it's fire, it's intensity, it's heat, it can be pain, so many sensations. And the more I just like allow myself to let the sensations move through, let the fear be felt, the emotional waves, all of it, let the obliteration happen. I find myself gaining fluency in like what feels like a natural pulse in this mechanism. And yet somehow no matter how often I practice, like each next round of obliteration somehow is harder or like more painful or more whatever. And the magic that is born on the other side is exquisite. It's unparalleled.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a word I really have to thank you for, exquisite. You've brought that into my life in such a powerful
Mm,
way.
Well, you're so welcome. Yeah, and I'll pay it forward. Thank you, Diana Chapman, for being the person who opened me up to the power of that word. So I relate to what you were saying. I get what you were saying about how it can feel actually like, in a way, in one form, it feels harder each time, even as you progress on the path and you get more reps under your belt of letting yourself be obliterated. I think there's some worthy inquiry there for you, and I can also eat this projection and take the medicine for myself as well, for us, of like when that's the experience we're creating, how are we creating that and how are we making it harder than it needs to be? One way I often do that is through a push towards speed or needing to get somewhere. And so I'm running my own spiritual engine at red line, so to speak.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's one way to do it. And you can do it. I've done a fair amount of that, and in some ways it's created some amazing results. In other ways it's created some challenging ones of like those that more intense intensity and hardness and suffering. On the other hand, there is also just that hardness is inherent in it. And to some extent, so it reminded me of this idea that that you've heard me talk about, of the never-ending spiral. It's a way that I like to characterize step 5 of the 5 steps of soulful impact of repeat. It's after we go through the journey of adopting an empowered creator mindset, turning towards what we're running from, waking up to that next level of wholeness, giving our gift at that next level of soulful, unfolding. Then it's like, okay, then it's like you're ready to peel back the next layer of the onion. And so what's going to happen is life is going to invite you into perhaps certain outward circumstances, but even more importantly, certain places within yourself where the pain lives, where the blockage lives, where the challenge lives, where the self-imposed limitation lives, or the unconscious pattern lives, that you are now ready for, that you weren't ready for before. You couldn't hold it before, so it stayed hidden in the shadow. You've now expanded and grown enough that actually you're available to it. So it's like that can feel like it's getting harder, and at the same time there's a way of kind of building the facility of comfort in the discomfort. And there's the other side of the spiral, which is also expanding into completely new levels of joy, completely new levels of fulfillment, aliveness, pleasure, ecstasy, exquisite, right? Which ironically can sometimes be just as hard for us to let ourselves feel.
As you're talking, I just am thinking about something that's been so present for me, which true healing and integration requires a willingness to feel more.
Yeah.
Feel more, period. Feel more of yourself.
Yeah.
Feel more of what's happening. Feel more of what your experience in relationship to other people. It just requires us to feel more.
Yeah.
And building the capacity and the tenacity, but just even building our capacity for that fluidity of feeling is such a skill. And it requires so much. It requires so much presence and attunement and really healing.
Yeah. 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 Sensitivity is a word that comes up for me. Like this journey is actually a journey of making ourselves more sensitive, or not, I wouldn't even say making ourselves more sensitive. It's like recovering or remembering our innate sensitivity.
Embracing our innate sensitivity so we can reclaim our attunement and our discernment.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. That's a beautiful way of pointing to the power of sensitivity. We're so conditioned in this culture to think of sensitivity as like a weakness or vulnerability or the immature masculine elements of our culture and society. Like I totally went through a phase, of be tough, boys don't cry, that sort of thing. And then there's this other element that Josh Sherrape of the Emerald podcast makes this point excruciatingly well. I think it might be I can't remember. Might be in those 2-part episode for the intuitives. I can't recall, but people in our culture losing their sensitivity, numbing themselves from their sensitivity, is a key element of how the machinery of modernity and capitalism and the military-industrial complex, et cetera, continue their dominance and their onslaught on the world and on all of us, because it's only through numbing ourselves that we are capable of even putting up with all of this shit, putting up with what the modern industrialized economy expects us to do to be quote unquote productive members of society. Even that, just to start, is so numbing. We have to numb ourselves to even just be able to do that, to be able to get through it. And then not to mention, be able to live with all the atrocities of war and environmental degradation and rape of the planet and genocide of each other. It's like, woof, on this supersized scale. Like people have always done terrible things to each other. There's no doubt about it. That's not distinct to modernity, but there is a distinct level of scale and intensity of it now. So this is where, and I heard I'm taking an online course with Bill Plotkin right now. It's phenomenal, and I heard him say the other day, a soul initiated adult is by definition subversive to modernity. And I think this is part of how that works. Mm-hmm. Because when we recover our innate sensitivity, we're just not going to play that game anymore. We're just not going to play ball with that shit anymore. And that's a challenging path to walk, and frankly, a dangerous one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What is that stirring you?
Oh, so much. I mean, as you were talking about modernity, what was also coming up for me was this pain I feel in the collective body in being severed from our connection to our bodies and our connection to ourselves. Like and when you watch how quickly we are conditioned out of listening to our own innate attunement and resonance, and how quickly we are given achievements and accolades and rewards for literally disconnecting. We are rewarded to disconnect. And then we are invited, or in some cases initiated, into these lives full of disconnection and rife with pain and no way to feel or process it. And yeah, of course, there's numbing. There's numbing in so many ways. And for me personally, this is kind of some of the challenge I'm rubbing up against in my life right now. Having reclaimed this relationship to soul and having been on the path, like intentionally devoting time to be with and understand my soul and allow myself to live a heart on fire, soul-led life. A lot of times it feels like my revolution is just living in my values more and more of the time, no matter how scary or disorienting that is for not only those around me, but for me. And it feels like a wild ride to be on. There's been so much magic, and there's also so much uncertainty. There's so much unknown.
Yeah, let's go there. I'd love to. Yeah, let's take this moment to kind of transition a little more into your story and your journey with this work. When you were speaking about the collective pain in our culture of being disconnected from our bodies, I know that to be a central component, hugely related to your calling and the medicine you are bringing and will continue to bring into the world. Let's invite you to begin though with maybe tracing back to that first vision quest that you came on with me, and you spoke to how that experience really opened you up to this thing called soul. But maybe fill in a little more color for folks of like what was awoken in you through that experience. Also, perhaps what died through you, and then what did you give birth to, and how has that informed the place you're at now, the work you're doing now, the path you are in now, the human you are now?
Tears behind my eyes as I'm going back to that moment. I went into my first quest with you ready to let my whole identity construct and sense of self die on the mountain, on the altar of the mountain. And as someone who's been really curious about what it actually means to like live a magical life in alignment with all of who we are, I've often played with this idea that maybe this most exquisite magical life is something beyond the realm that my brain can envision or imagine. And so how do I open up beyond what can be the limiting construct of my mind into the thing that, like, deep down from the depth of my beingness, I'm actually craving and seeking. And because I'd been in this traumatic break with my work, I was willing to let even my relationship to that die on the mountain. And my first quest was mostly centered around letting the version of me that I was coming in with die and open up to something new. And what was also pretty novel about this experience was allowing nature to be the source of the medicine, and allowing my communion with nature and the earth to be the seat of where I would begin this transformation. And I'd always been deeply connected to nature, but being able to intentionally weave ceremony and time and attention into this space, and to begin to explore what it means to be in communion with the earth in devotional ritual and attunement. I mean, it's so hard to put into words, but the sense of connection, the sense of safety, the sense of belonging, the sense of being welcome and wanted by this world. These were key currencies I got to tap into probably for the first time, and if not the first time, in like one of the more consistent ways as a result of the quest. I came into this work being ready to put my whole self in and having really no expectations, which I think allowed me to be open to a lot of in-betweens. And I was also pretty, what feels like, blessed to be able to start receiving my soul name, even in that first quest, which is Soaring Fireheart. I spent some time trying to understand this name intellectually, but really, even just being with this name over the last 2.5, almost 3 years, the name itself has evoked so much for me in relationship to what feels deep and rich and resonant and true in my beingness, as like the deep longings and desires I actually hold as a human being, which is to be a beacon of unconditional love, to love more fully, to love more wholly, to be a channel of love, understanding what love truly is as like the full human, the full spectrum range of all we are, all our parts, all our emotions, all our energies, all our fields. And with this initiation, while it feels resonant and true, it also feels terrifying. It also feels in some ways deranged and psychotic. Like, this is such a big calling. Like, who wouldn't want this? But then, like, even just allowing myself to acknowledge the resonance I feel with this. Yeah, there's so many layers. There's so much complexity here woven in, and I'm doing my best to just like pull at a few parts here in this moment in this conversation, but it's such rich terrain.
You're doing a beautiful job, my friend. Yeah. You're just being you. You're being the soaring fire heart that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's radiant. It's warm. It's, yeah, powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's reshaped a lot of how I think about life and how I think about being in relationship with life. And I think this has been one of the unexpected hidden gifts I never thought I wanted or knew I needed. But as a result of being in relationship with this, it's felt like such a coming home to such a deep part of me I've always felt and been in some ways orbiting around, but now I get to be in direct contact with and communion with.
Yeah.
And engage with, like, in any way, shape, or form I want, in any piece of my life I want.
Talk about exquisite.
It's an incredible frequency. And
yeah,
when I get to connect with and beam and be more of her, more of the entity of Soaring Fireheart, it's beyond words. It's beyond everything.
I know.
I know, you know.
And yeah. And I'm remembering too what you shared earlier about a tendency towards spiritual bypass and a theme in your work lately around not needing to be so shiny and bubbly and joyful all the time, and that's where I also pick up on what I imagine. And well, actually, I know you well enough. It's more than imagine. I know what I know to be part of also the challenge that you've faced and continue to be cooked by and alchemized by, which is to have access to such grandeur, to have access to such fiery soaring heights, heart on fire, explosive highs, and to still be embodied as a human in this time, in this world, in a human life, and all of the stuff that comes with that, right? To like, that's a lot to hold.
Yeah.
And this is a real thing. Like it maybe, there's a voice in my head that's like, yeah, well, it's a good problem to have, but yeah, okay, I agree. And it can still be a real challenge. And, comes to mind, a man I knew I wasn't particularly close with, but had experienced his radiant light, and have a lot of friends in my local community who were very close to him, just recently took his own life. And a big part of how my fumbling attempts to make sense of it so far, a part of it has been that I knew this man to be a true visionary, like an incredible visionary. Everyone knew him to be that way. That's part of why his choice was such a shock to so many, but that I can relate to the pain. So I shared with some friends about this the other day. I can imagine and relate to the pain that it is to be someone who is so powerfully in touch with the beauty of what is possible, and yet simultaneously faced with what can sometimes feel like the crushing realities and the really dismal, dark realities of the moment and of this human existence. Like that can be a tension that can break somebody. So I think it's a really important question, like a really sacred question, as to like, how do we hold that tension well? And how do we hold ourselves well and hold each other well in this kind of experience where that never ending spiral is expanding and expanding, and we're going through higher highs and lower lows. And yeah, how do we keep our ground in all of that?
Yeah, it's a big question. My lows have been really low. Like I empathize might be the wrong word, but I really also resonate with that place of knowing the potential of the vision, knowing the sweetness of what being in conjunction with it feels like. And then when you're in separation from it, the pain. I mean,
Yeah.
you know this, but like I had multiple periods in my life where I have been deep in like the depths, the pit of depression where suicidal thoughts and ideation are running through. And like, I want to lean in. That feels like the place to go, because the pain of the separation, the crush of the void, and the gap between what I know is possible and true, what I've tasted and experienced and lived in before, and then feeling so separate from that is so much. To your point, I have some ideas and theories on how we can be better stewards of our
What's helped
own.
you out? Yeah. What's been supportive
Yeah.
for you so far?
Honestly, the most powerful piece has been understanding these waves of emotion as waves of energy that have information to disseminate through our system. And for me personally, every time I find myself in the depths of a depression and on the verge of suicide, there is also a correlation with how much I have been repressing accumulatively over time. And there's often a direct correlation with how much I've been repressing to then experience the depressing.
Uh-huh.
And it almost feels like a cosmic joke, because in some ways this is also a bit paradoxical, because when you're in the depths of wanting to kill yourself, like nothing really feels like a joke. But this last wave I went through, it was so evident to me that I'd been actually in, invited into many opportunities of feeling this energy, this wave move through. And I was in such fear and distrust of it that I held it at bay and like kept myself in struggling and sacrifice and pain in doing so, until at one point there was no holding back. And something I'm actively practicing more and more now is, can I let the emotional wave run through when it's here, sooner and with less waiting, and hopefully with more acceptance and less resistance? And the more I do that, the more I find myself almost recalibrating my nervous system back into how it authentically was when I first came into this body. And I find myself more often regulating even the challenging frequencies of emotions that I tend to avoid, like anger and fear. I can let them run through and then find myself bopping out 2 minutes later, like a toddler, fine, on the other end, and
Mm-hmm.
feeling
Mm-hmm.
equipped, feeling regulated, feeling clear, and having that integrated understanding of what the emotion was trying to bring and birth forth.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. Yeah, I'm reminded of again this theme we touched on earlier of the societal numbing, which informs the way we were conditioned as new beings in this world, coming into, even if you came into a family, that even if you were lucky enough to come into a nuclear family who was relatively attuned on this dimension, you're still coming into a culture that is very, very deeply sick in this way, like very deeply addicted to
Mhm.
numbing ourselves. And so we miss on some level, all of us. There's kind of some unfinished business of what would have otherwise been a healthy uh, development in our younger years, to just find that emotional fluidity as younger versions of ourselves. It makes sense to me that, like, the thought that's coming up is like it's a much harder experience. I don't know if this is true, but it's a thought that I'm having, that it's maybe harder um, to learn to create that fluidity after many years of the opposite pattern. But then again, but then I come back to, like, I guess that's what our souls came here for. This is like a key part of what is our work. Certainly you and I, Marie, and I bet a lot of our listeners too. And I'd suggest a lot of us collectively in this time. It's a lot of our collective soul work is this journey of allowing ourselves to be sensitive again and encountering all of the fucking darkness and demons and trials and tribulations and exquisite, expansive, heart on fire, soaring heights that entails.
Yeah, something I'm noticing is energy is moving faster than ever before. We are inundated with energy all the time, and if we want to be able to be in resonance and attunement with it, we have to be able and willing to run more energy through our own system, which the prerequisite for that means opening up our system to feel more of what is already here and to feel more of ourselves. And I just see this very direct parallel with the direction that life force and humanity and consciousness is going. Run more energy, but we have to be willing to open up to it within ourselves. And I think this is kind of one of the many facets of medicine coming through soul work in this day and age is like an invitation into our sensitivity, our attunement and resonance, so we can become better stewards and wielders and channels of this energy that's we're running.
Absolutely. I would say that's a great way to describe human evolution, or at least the potential for evolution that is here for us, is allowing ourselves to be more efficient and skillful conduits of energy moving through us. I get really excited imagining the kind of impacts that would have on the evolution of our species.
Oh, I see many.
I want to give you an opportunity to share a little more about the work that you do and share a little more about the journey that you're on with it. So, right, no need to like have it be all polished and complete, right? But like the journey that you're on, especially as someone who, because your first quest was, I suppose, like 2.5 years ago now. Is that about right? Yeah. So also just be great perspective for our listeners, who I imagine many of whom out there are, considering the possibility of a quest someday, or maybe have been on a quest themselves. Like, let them in a little bit onto your experience of, at least in your journey, 2.5 years out, and the journey of metamorphosis, as Plotkin refers to it, but also just the path of integrating a soul-centered existence into a modern life.
Yeah, small question.
I'm known for those. I think like every other podcast guest I have is it makes some comment like that at some point.
I love the big questions. I mean, small. I mean, whatever. Yeah. So my work has really stemmed from a lifelong curiosity and fascination with embodied intelligence. And I had this early on personal experience of it through my early start in dance, where dance was this magical place where I could take anything I was holding on to in my life and transmute it. And I could transmute it within moments. And it was the space I could bring all of myself, my frustration, my anger, all the pieces of me that didn't have permission to exist in normal society. I got regular access to be with and feel and transmute from dance. So I somehow happened to be this unique human who got to stay in contact with this embodied intelligence. And I've always been curious about the many ways I believe it can hold and support and nourish us. And there have been a few unexpected surprises in being in devotion to following my innate embodied intelligence, one of which showed up very early on, about 8 months into my devotional practice of once a week for 2 hours, creating a container where the only prerogative was to follow what feels good, no matter what it looks like. No matter if I was lying down, running around, crying, journaling, dancing, it was all welcome. And 8 months in, my orgasm capacity started going off the charts. And many people who I spoke to about this wanted me to guide them on that.
And just clarify, what do you mean by orgasm capacity?
So I went from being able to have 1 to 3, maybe upwards of 7 orgasms in a sexual experience, to then having 20, 30, 60, 80, 90. And this was happening within a span of weeks. And it was happening with different partners. And this capacity was continuing to exponentialize. And in 8 years, now it has proliferated outside of sexual experiences. I am now about 1.5 years into being able to tap into my embodied intelligence, follow the flow of life force energy within me, and within minutes, I can hit what I call the orgasm field and suddenly be in full body orgasm simply through moving and dancing. And my understanding of what's happening here for me is that my attunement to my own embodied intelligence and this practice of intuitive movement, of simply tracing, tracking, being with this innate intelligence, or what I now see as my vitality, aliveness, life force source moving through me as the unique soul constellation I am. As I develop my own relationship to being with this energy, I enrich and expand my capacity to wield more of it. And in my experience, when we open up to this level of aliveness, it knows how to guide us in service of our greatest harmony and coherence. It guides us down the path of least resistance. Not only does it bring us into our full vitality, health, and harmony in our bodies, but it brings us into more health, harmony, vitality in our minds, in our spirits, in our souls, in our emotional selves, and our relationships. And I believe what I'm really here to gift people is the gift of pleasure medicine, and to show that this relationship with pleasure is not actually this one-dimensional facet of like hedonism. I noticed most people associate with pleasure, but pleasure is actually a dynamic, moving entity. It is. I really experience it as life force itself, looking to understand, know, and meet more of itself over time. And in 8 years of pleasure, pleasure has required me to enrich my foundation of feeling, period. And it's led me into my pain. It's led me into the parts that I've historically avoided or disassociated. And it's given me a basis and support to be with those parts and to start welcoming them in, and to actually allow me to reclaim more of my innate self and beingness.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think there's so much medicine in pleasure that I still have yet to understand and be able to speak to. But it's clearly been working some crazy magic through my life in so many unexpected ways. And I'm really currently, this has been very true for me in the last few months. I experience this ability to have orgasms independently of sex as less about libido and lust and like carnal desire and pleasure, and more a way that our bodies innately know how to run explosive outbursts of coherent harmonic frequency that integrate us psychosomatically on so many levels from the inside out.
Thank you for sharing your gift with us. Really, it's so beautiful to see you, to witness you in this. And I'm just having the thought, like, it's I guess it's been a while since I've maybe asked you that question or heard you talk about your work, and there's some newness there, and I'm just celebrating the beauty of and the deep wisdom of all that just came through you, that you just shared, and also the journey that you've been on, from the ecstatic to the treacherous to find your way into all of that. And also, but not just find your way into it, but find your way into holding it. Because I feel you holding it in a way that that hasn't always been there in the past. And especially what you just ended on there, of like, this actually is not about lustfulness and carnal desire. It's not just about like not just that hedonistic bit. Like, yes, absolutely, like, enjoy the pleasure, but recognize like this is a sacred happening. This is a way of coherent, creative life force energy moving through you.
I have more to say because this ties into the soul piece. I listened to the Emerald podcast episode on the Divine Mother like 3 times in the last few days, and it's felt so deep, rich, and resonant. And I've noticed, like, in my relationship with getting to know and allow for more of soaring Fireheart to exist, like there's a real deep connection with the earth and a real desire to transmit the medicine and the love and the lessons from the earth directly. And the deeper I go into my own exploration of intuitive movement and being with embodied intelligence, it continues to feel more and more like a practice of opening up to the energies of Mother Earth and our primordial selves, the divine feminine, which lives through the body, and to give ourselves permission and space to let her speak through us, to be moved by something greater, to be witnessed and held by something greater, and to understand more of ourselves through our communion with her.
Help us. Once again, I do want to come back to landing all of this a little more in the context of your experience, especially in recent years since the quest, and just because I think so. Because what I'm hearing coming through you right now is this very soul rooted, soul embodied vision and articulation of your gifts, at least in some form.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm thinking would be really supportive for a lot of people who might be listening is like a little more behind the scenes view as like, all right, what was the actual process that got you to this place where you can come on this podcast and say these words with such conviction?
Yeah.
So like you referred to the traumatic prior work experience. And so if I recall correctly, that was your previous business in New York City as a personal trainer, right? Or you'd been quite.
Well, this was actually, I partnered with a friend from college in 2020 to take my intuitive movement work and build it into a business. It was called Evolna at the time. Yeah.
You'd already had that unlock of your regular practice of just letting yourself move in whatever way felt good and noticing how that unlocked this incredible orgasmic capacity. So that had already occurred. And then you partnered with a friend to try to turn it into a business. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. And within 2 years, felt so mutilated with my relationship to the practice. I wanted nothing to do with it.
And how had you created that?
Step number 1, assume that your partner always knows more than you. Step number 2, don't let yourself speak to what feels resonant and true for you. Instead, assume everyone else knows better than you and that you're getting it wrong. And so it's just this.
So silence yourself and give yourself away.
Yeah, huge self-abandonment.
And how'd you convince yourself to do that?
Well, I was convinced I didn't know enough on the scale of finances and running a business to take this entity and make it into a successful business.
So you thought you needed to do all of that to be successful. You need to give yourself away to be successful. Yep.
Yeah.
So then there was this death rebirth portal of the quest that you went through that allowed you to face and heal and alchemize and shift a lot of that. Am I right?
Yeah. I don't think I started actually facing and shifting and alchemizing the wound around my work until this last year. But
That's interesting because I remember you talking about it on that quest program.
Yeah. I talked a lot. I didn't move a lot of the energy.
I see.
Played a lot of my avoidance game, ideate, and look how exciting this is. Look at all the inspiration. And then when time comes to move, I get in the grips of the fear, the inadequacy, all the old programming. And then I would say, this isn't a whole body. Yes. Spiritual bypassy.
Yeah. And I would just offer maybe a little slightly more generous characterization of that time as preparation and actually like the early stages of peeling back the layers to get yourself to be ready to face the full depth of the wound.
Yeah, in many ways, my experience with your work, Brooks, allowed me to start building and enacting a key skill set so that I could even begin to start orienting around integrating that trauma and alchemizing it and moving forward again. And I can speak more to like how since that quest, like what I've done in my life to support this connection to soul. Yeah, well, first off, you had a few extension programs that you were running, and those were really, actually the one you ran last year was really helpful because it helped me see when I was pulling away out of my soul work and see the correlation of how that was affecting my overall health and well-being. And as I got to become reacquainted with it again, it kind of initiated a lot of energy and movement, including the dissolution of a relationship that I was very attached to, and really kind of the disillusion of a whole life I'd been building so that I could start from the ground up. And a lot of how I practice staying in relationship with my soul is I've taken a lot of these principles that you introduced me to as a result of Bill Plotkin and Animas Valley, and I've allowed myself to kind of play with them in a variety of ways. In many ways, my soul work feels like it overlaps with exquisite self-care, meditation, time getting nourished by the earth outside. And so whenever I'm choosing to engage with it, it feels like it restores me on a few levels. And so it's easy for me to prioritize it because I can feel how much I'm getting. And one of the most powerful practices I love returning back to is this kind of somatic walking embodiment of soaring fire heart. And this is one of the practices that's probably a little bit more on like the edge of like mad scientist playing crazy games, but I love taking these extended walks out in the Boulder foothills and in the trails here. I love getting lost for 2 to 3 hours on a trail. And one of my favorite things to play with when I'm out and walking on the mountain is just like, if I'm going to really become and be this magical entity, this unique soul constellation, how does she walk and emanate? What does she feel like rippling through my body? How is she communing with the earth below me? And like, how is she stewarding this energy field? And I just play with that vision and enact this embodiment and let myself get fantastical with it, seeing the creature of a phoenix or a dragon or whatever mythical entity feels resonant. But even just feeling my own internal animation of her or the emanation of her, just evoking that game feels really profound and powerful. It also feels so holy beyond words, such a powerful communion to be in. And I can't say like I fully understand where it's leading me or where it's taking me,
No.
but I do see that practices like this, like I somehow continue to get more feedback from the world around me that's a reflection of the values and principles and stewardship of soaring fireheart.
It's not meant to be understood in the normal kind of intellectual way. The way I understand it, that's precisely how soul guides us into more expansive possibilities than we could possibly imagine, is by leading us in ways that are completely incomprehensible to the ego. I love imagining you on those, on those trails, and yeah, no, I've witnessed you in that practice for a while, and it's so simple but so powerful. It's like, yeah, what if you just allowed that mythopoetic identity to take you over, that mythic version of you that connects you to the mystery of your soul. Like what is it? Yeah, what's it like to just embody her and let her lead us? Yeah, really beautiful, beautiful practice.
And often when I'm in the practice, I find myself receiving these downloads, and they feel less like forecasting into the future and more like opening my awareness to the possibility and potential of like what a truly impactful, soulful life looks like, what it truly means to create soulful impact versus business impact. And just to understand like the potency of what it means to feel this field of this soul, this unique entity, and the power that has to impact others.
Yeah.
It's totally reformulated my awareness and understanding of what it means to be a human offering a magical service, contribution, gift to the world, and to be able to move it outside of the identity of career and work only.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the humble understanding that all you're really doing is being a channel for it. That it's really like you can't really take credit for it because it comes through you. You can take credit for creating yourself as the conduit for it, which is really, really huge and important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I'd love to invite you to define in your own words. Maybe folks have heard me define it in my own way, probably, or several different ways, but how would you define what is soulful impact?
I define soulful impact as making space for more of the magic of you to authentically flow and permeate in all the ways it already wants to flow. And it's, for me, it is so married with like this dance of like what it means to be spirit manifested in this unique form, and the understanding that like our uniqueness is our magic.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we allow ourselves to get curious about and be in communion with all the things that make us unique, and lean in and follow the aliveness, follow the fire, we become a gift to the world in how we animate and hold our bodies, our very presence, the tone of our words, the words that spill forth. And by extension, anything and anyone we lace and layer our energy into also gets to benefit from that magic. And I just witnessing it in my life, the more I'm attuning to and holding the field and the presence for this entity of soaring fireheart, I get to witness the magic of her impact. When I enter a room, when I give people one of my trademark whole body hugs, when I say something and I watch someone's energy light up in their being, when I move a certain way and I watch energy move in someone's being. And it's an impact that's felt and deep and resonant. It's beyond words. And it's so much bigger than our minds can dream.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. So glad I have that recorded. I'm gonna go back and listen to it. Yeah, what did Marie say? Yeah. Let's go. Okay. So this last piece, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
And we can delete this from the recording if you decide it doesn't feel good or you don't want it.
Okay.
But because I know that you've been in a time lately that a lot of these pieces have been coming together, and you've been attending to this very intricate and charged question of how do you land all of the magic of you that you just revealed to all of us in this conversation in the practical form of a quote unquote, I don't want to call it a job, but like a livelihood. How do you allow it to sustain you? How do you allow it to meet the practicalities of money and time and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So I want to invite you to take a shot at like here, just giving your elevator pitch to this audience. Who do you work with? Who do you support? And what do you do for them? And I'm asking you this because I think you have it ready. I think it's ready to pop. And I don't know, maybe it's right there on the edge, but I want to hold space for it right now.
I support people who recognize and are aware of their innate embodied intelligence and want to be in a more attuned and a more reciprocal relationship with it. Another way to say this is I help people come into contact with more of their innate vitality, more of their innate aliveness, more of their genius, more of their gifts. And the way we do this is by tracking and following energy. And as a guide, I'm very attuned to sensing for and witnessing how aliveness is moving through a system. And our work together is to open your capacity to feel for more of your aliveness, to build a trusting relationship and leaning into the guidance of your innate aliveness, and being held in an exquisite container to guide you through the ups and downs of that process. Because as we bring more energy into the system, we need to enrich our capacity to hold more on all sides in all facets.
And is it true to say that you're doing that primarily through the map of the body and helping people track and understand and feel that energy through their own bodies? Is that accurate?
Yes and no, because as we attune to the body, we actually learn to attune to our entire energy field. And so a lot of what I'm guiding people into is enriching their own sensitivity and attunement to their multiple centers of intelligence. So their embodied, their intellect, and even like the chakral intelligence and the intelligence of like their desire impulse, their heart, their gut. And understanding how to make sense of all these different forms of intelligence weaving together, and to be able to find more resonance, coherence and clarity as all these forms of intelligence commune and intersect.
And where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Wow. I'm currently building my website. But otherwise, I can be found on Instagram at Marie Janicek. I read all the DMs that come through. And I can also be found, I actually have my personal website, but I still need to revamp that.
Instagram. Beautiful.
Instagram. Yeah.
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 Do you have any final closing words you want to leave us with before we depart?
Choosing to live a life in relationship to soul is not necessarily easy, but it is divinely and exquisitely magical, beautiful in the most unexpected ways. And after having tasted the nectar of a life lived infused with soul versus not, I will always lean in to life infused with soul. It's been such a beautiful initiation, reclamation, and calling. And I am so honored to be in these waters with you all.
Me too. Thank you, my friend.
And thank you for creating a space to hold conversations like these and to bring light to this piece of our humanity that's been craving for our attention for so long.
It is my exquisite pleasure. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. If you, like me, feel passionate about this idea of redefining the way we think about impact to a bit more of a soulful orientation and what that could do for our planet, for our species, for all beings, then please, 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 I'd love to ask for your help. If you could just take a moment to subscribe on whatever platform you receive this podcast and leave, if it feels right to you, a glowing 5-star review. That will do wonders in supporting me in growing this show, attracting more amazing guests, and really bringing this movement, this exploration out into the world. Thank you so much for your time and attention. So glad you joined us here for this conversation today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.